This is 16.3 Coaching Session Review and Development Plan by Edward Sayers. So before I began to plan my session, I had to think of what I wanted the aims of my session to be. I wanted to improve my group's understanding and performance when it came to striking and fielding sports such as rounders. I also decided to use drills that would work in improving students' fielding skills. Fielding skills is a broad term, and within this includes things such as catching and throwing accuracy. I set out objectives of my session by making a SMART target. One of these main objectives for my session was to improve my group's communication. I also created a SMART target to see if they were meeting the other lesson objectives. I had to make sure that these targets were specific to the session, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time appropriate. This is my risk assessment. I'm going to hold on this slide to allow you to pause the video to check out my risk assessment to see what type of things I've included within my risk assessment. Now I'm going to show you the session that I planned to use when I was with the group. This first slide shows the warm-up that I used with the group, so I'm going to stay on this slide for a little bit to allow you to pause the video and have a look like before. I'm now going to proceed through the rest of the session that I planned, allowing enough time for you to pause on each slide to see exactly what I did with the group that I took. Now we are going to look at the review of the session that I had planned. To do this, we are going to look at the aims that I had set out to achieve to see if they were met. So my aim at the start of the session was to improve my students' fielding skills and the understanding, and to improve their performance also. The way in which I assessed this was to gain a basic understanding of my group's fielding skills at the start of the session and during the end of the session through the drills, observing the students to see if any improvements had arisen in their fielding skills. Another way in which I assessed was by asking them questions at the end of the session to see if the students believed that the exercises that were set were useful in improving their fielding skills. The response I received was very positive, which led me to believe that I had been successful in reaching my aim. I also asked students questions after I had explained exercises to make sure that they fully had gained a better understanding of what I was asking them to do within the exercises. I also made sure that during my exercise I met all the criteria within my SMART target, such as things like my session was very specific towards striking and fielding sports. Also, I made sure that it was within the right time slot, which is the time-bound factor of this. So it was around about an hour, which was what I needed my session to be. Also, the way in which I measured was very helpful, because I got people to tell me answers without me just giving it to them and talking the whole time. I also got them to respond to me to make sure, for not only their benefit but for mine as well, to make sure that I knew that everyone was listening and understanding what I was saying to them. And also in some instances I got them to demonstrate things that I'd asked them to do. So I'd use 3 key coaching points to explain it quite easily and simply for them to understand. And by doing that, they were then able to demonstrate that I was able to use one of them as an example, and they could demonstrate it back to me for the rest of the group, so it was easier for everyone to understand. I'm now going to move on the SWOT analysis of my session. So we're going to start off with the strengths that I had within planning my session. So one strength I believe that I had within the planning of my session is that I included an exercise to work on all the disciplines within striking and fielding sports. For example, I made sure that I included a drill that worked on a student's catching, and I made sure that I also included a drill that worked on their throwing accuracy skills. Then in my condition game, I included all the skills that they had learnt within the drills, and also batting skills, which is another one of the disciplines of striking and fielding sports such as rounders. And then some of the strengths within the delivery of my session was that I gave clear and easy to understand instructions. This allowed people to be more effective this allowed my session to be more effective. Because there was minimal, if any, confusion onto what my session was and what they had to do within it. Also, the clear instructions reduced the need for me to repeat my instructions because everyone knew what to do. Another strength was that I spoke very clearly, and I spoke loudly when necessary if my group was far apart, so I then therefore didn't have to bring them in as often and slow down the pace of my session. This helped to explain drills which I was setting out, which I had previously explained, but again, by speaking clearly, it minimised the risk of confusion and need for repetition, and overall made the session more enjoyable for the participant because they could just get on with the session with no issue. Another strength when delivering my session was that I felt I was good at giving praise. I believe this also made me a good motivator within my session, because I would give praise to someone when they were doing the right technique which I had previously taught them during the session. When giving people praise who were using the correct technique, it encouraged others to do the same who perhaps weren't using the correct technique. So by praising people, I was also motivating people who weren't perhaps using the right technique to do it, so that they could be praised for it. Now to look at some of the weaknesses I believed I had within the planning of my session. So a weakness I think I had, even though the drills did cover all the disciplines as said as one of my strengths, it could be argued that they were quite simplistic. There was a progression system which I did have planned, as can be seen in the session plan previously in the video. However, striking and fielding wasn't an area where I was massively experienced, so I didn't know a whole lot of drills that I could use within my session. And another weakness I would say that I had in the planning of my session was that I planned my whole session out, and I didn't think about the timing of my session. So when it came to actually delivering my session, I ran out of content, and I had a few minutes at the end to spare. So if I was planning on doing the session again, I'd need to make sure that I had possibly more content more planned than needed, so that if it came to it and I needed to add in more, then I would have a plan B, so to say, to put into action if necessary when doing this again, to make sure that everyone gets the most out of the hours-long session. And a second weakness that I believe that I had during the delivery of my session was that I was giving good coaching points to the students within my group. However, there was a lot of unnecessary speech in between, and this unnecessary speech was taking up time which could have been used to get my group active and get out and doing the session that I'd planned. So, like before, if I could go back and do the session, I would definitely have to try and cut down on the amount of unnecessary speaking I did with my group, to make sure that everyone again gets the most out of the session, which is what everyone would like to do. There are some opportunities that I could take to improve on these weaknesses that have appeared during both the planning and delivery of my session. One of the weaknesses, to therefore make some of these weaknesses possibly some of my best assets. One way in which I could improve the planning skills is to do a level 1 sports specific course to gain more knowledge of different types of striking and fielding drills that I could use within future sessions. This would allow me to have a broader knowledge and would allow me to add more variation within my session and reduce the risk of tedium and boredom within my session. Also within this course, I would learn a regression and progression system, which would again help to reduce the risk of tedium and boredom, but then would also add an element of challenge within my session if it was necessary. There are also opportunities to improve weaknesses that I found within the delivery of my session. There is an opportunity to improve my time management skills by doing a level 1 coaching course. This will allow me to have more experience and to gain more knowledge to run a successful session within the time slot that I've been given. By doing this coaching course, I would hopefully be able to make this weakness one of my strengths. An opportunity is there to improve the fact that I spoke too much in the delivery of my session. So one way I could think about doing this is possibly getting someone to video me leading a session, and then I can therefore look back and observe how much unnecessary speaking I did within my session, and then try and cut this down over a period of weeks to then hopefully make it as minimalistic as possible, so then everyone can get the most out of my session, which is what we will want. However, there are also some threats that come with taking up these opportunities. One would be the cost of the courses. So the level 1 coaching course will cost me around £100 to £120, as well as travel to get to and from the venue which it is being held at. Cost is also the case for the sports-specific course. This will cost price range between £80 and £100, as well as the travelling cost again. This is something that may be a threat from me taking up these opportunities that would allow me to improve on the weaknesses that arose from the session that I had recently delivered. The second threat that there is the locations of where these opportunities are. To get to the course, to get to some of the courses, I would have to pay to get public transport because it is not close enough to be a walking distance. So I'd have to make sure that I allow enough time in my day to travel to and from the session, and obviously do the session as well, which may cause some problems. Therefore, the third threat might be that I need to allow enough time to get to the venues to make sure that I get enough out, make sure that I make the most of the session. So I get there, do the session and get back. And unfortunately, this might make some of the opportunities unavailable for me. So we're now going to look at some of the strengths that I found within both the planning and delivery of my session and how that impacted on my session. So first, I found that a strength I had was that I was good at giving clear instructions. When explaining the activity to the group, I made sure that I used short and clear instructions to make sure that the whole group understood what to do within the activity. I made sure that I used easy to understand language and coaching points so that it was easy to put across to my group what I was saying. The impact of these clear instructions was that it allowed the session to flow much more smoothly, as people knew exactly what they were doing and didn't have to stop to ask me what they were doing. So therefore, I didn't have to repeat myself. Instead, they could just get on and do the activity because they knew exactly what they'd been asked to do, which made the session a lot better for them. A second strength I think I had that I was good at was that I was good at giving praise to people within the group that I was leading. During my session, I gave students praise who were using the correct catching and throwing technique that I had taught them during the session. The praise was not only to benefit the person who was using the correct technique, but also to motivate the other students within the group to use the correct technique. The impact of this praise was that students began to adapt the correct technique that they might not have previously been using, that had been taught to them during the session, and therefore would make the condition game at the end much more effective because everyone was using the correct technique and made the session a lot more enjoyable for everyone. Finally, the third strength that I had was, again, within the planning of my session. This is because I made sure that I included all the principles within striking and fielding sports, including things such as catching and throwing accuracy. The way in which the strength helped to impact my session was that it therefore allowed the people in my group to improve on all the principles within the specific catching and fielding sports such as rounders. This allowed my session to be much more inclusive as it allowed people to take part in activities that may be a strength or a weakness. And what I mean by this is that for some people, a throwing activity might be difficult for them, so then they can use the activity that I planned to improve on their weakness. Then, however, they might find that the catching exercise for them is one of their real strengths within a striking and fielding sports. Therefore, the variety in the types of activities I had would be some people's strengths and some people's weaknesses, so there'd be a little bit of something for everyone within my group.